I believe that this nation should commit itself to achieving the goal, before this decade is out, of landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to the earth. No single space project in this period will be more impressive to mankind or more important for the long-range exploration of space.
All engine running. Liftoff. We have a liftoff. 42 minutes past the hour. Liftoff on Apollo 11.
The spectacular launch of Apollo 11 in 1969 seemed a noble expression of the full potential of rational human scientific reasoning. The apparent success of that first manned lunar flight also established a profound measure of public pride and confidence in the stalwart dedication and integrity of the men and women employed by America's first civilian space agency, the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, NASA. In 1969, no human endeavor could have appeared more far removed from primitive superstitions and ancient occult mysticism than our National Space Agency, an agency whose rocketry success was solidly grounded in precise mathematical logic and practical technological rationality. And yet, while a decade of NASA's spaceflight wizardry enthralled a nation of television viewers almost nightly, the truth of NASA's deeply dark, occult origins was discreetly hidden from public awareness. Origins linked, perhaps, to the most wicked of occult practitioners in modern history, none other than self-proclaimed Satanist Aleister Crowley himself. This uncanny convergence of science and mysticism was facilitated by the rocket pioneer genius and founder of Caltech's Jet Propulsion Laboratory, John Whiteside Parsons. In the years just prior to the Second World War, Jack Parsons and a handful of his Caltech buddies were working to perfect solid-fuel rocket propulsion. Parsons' rocket project limped along on a shoestring budget until his efforts drew serious attention from the Defense Department. Thanks to the war, his research expanded into a major rocket design enterprise that would become known as the Jet Propulsion Laboratory in Pasadena, California, JPL, which in turn would develop a vital association with more advanced space rocket design proposed by the National Aeronautics and Space Administration. But Jack Parsons was possessed with extraordinary ideas that sought far loftier heights than mere space rocket designs. Parsons was fascinated by the occult, and in 1941 he was to join the Pasadena chapter of Ordo Templi Orientis, Aleister Crowley's secret society. Not long after, Parsons took over the Agape Lodge himself. Observing Parsons' natural aptitude for ritual sex magic, called Thelema, the membership saw him as a potential successor to the great beast Aleister Crowley himself, whom Parsons addressed as Most Beloved Father. Born on October 12, 1875, in Warwickshire, England, Aleister Crowley was an English occultist, ceremonial magician, poet, painter, novelist, and mountaineer. He was responsible for founding the religion and philosophy of sexual magic, Thelema, in which role he identified himself as the prophet entrusted with guiding humanity into the Aeon of Horus in the early 20th century. In 1898 he joined the esoteric Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, where he was trained in ceremonial magic. Like many of that era, Crowley was something of a crusading militant intellectual, determined to break down the conventions of accepted social morality. Later he traveled to Mexico and then India to study Hindu and Buddhist practices. In 1904 he married Rose Edith Kelly, and they honeymooned in Cairo, Egypt. In the Great Pyramid, Crowley conducted an occult ritual intending to access supernatural powers. The black magic ritual held in the Great Pyramid marked an unexpected turning point in Crowley's life. The following day he recounted, "Rose got into a strange state of mind. I had never seen anything like it before. She kept on repeating, dreamily yet intensely, 'They are waiting for you. They are waiting for you.'" When Crowley asked Rose who was waiting, she kept repeating that it was Horus, an Egyptian god. Rose knew nothing of magic and even less of Egyptology, making it highly unlikely that she was receiving a message from the gods. But to test what Rose was saying, he took her to the Cairo Museum. And although Rose had never visited the museum before, she rushed through the rooms filled with ancient artifacts, until suddenly she stopped dead before case number 666. "There he is," she insisted. Within the case was the image of the god she claimed to have seen in her vision, the god Horus. Over the next 3 days, at precisely the same time, an unearthly voice dictated to Crowley the Book of the Law, the book that would become the Bible of his new religion. Following their fateful ritual in the Great Pyramid, Crowley's wife Rose mysteriously proclaimed that the equinox of the gods has come. The alleged superhuman intelligence contacted by Aleister Crowley during his visit to Egypt was named Aiwass, who declared, "I am a god of war and vengeance," and then dictated to Crowley a work called the Book of the Law, which prophesied wars and revolutions leading to the collapse of Christian civilizations and the dawn of the Aeon of Horus. Crowley's Bible also proclaims the law of Thelema, usually summed up in 3 mantra-like verses. "Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. Love is the law, love under will. And every man and every woman is a star." According to another Crowley student, Kenneth Grant, Aiwass is an extraterrestrial from Sirius, the stellar representation of the Egyptian goddess Isis. Years later, from January through March of 1918, Crowley began another series of sexual magic ceremonies in New York City called the Amalantra Workings, in a Central Park West apartment to intentionally open a portal of entry allowing demonic and other similar entities a passageway to access our earthly world reality. Crowley was convinced that seeking contact with supernatural beings offered the only salvation to the human race. My observation of the universe convinces me that there are beings of intelligence and power of a far higher quality than anything we can conceive of as human, that they are not necessarily based on the cerebral and nervous structures that we know, and that the one and only chance for mankind to advance as a whole is for individuals to make contact with such beings. His ritual in New York, established contact with an entity called Lam. Lam being a Tibetan word for pathway or pathfinder. Lam was considered to be of interdimensional origin, which was the term then for extraterrestrial. Crowley's drawing of Lam bears a striking resemblance to what has become commonly referred to as the gray aliens. Slight-bodied, big-headed, large dark-eyed mannequin creatures which are primarily an American phenomenon. And it is interesting to note that all the Lam workings were done in America. Reports of these UFO-associated entities later became prevalent in the popular culture of the 1980s thanks to Whitley Strieber's best-selling book, Communion, as well as many of the Hollywood alien movies that would follow. The rift in between the spaces of the stars, created by the Amalantra working, opened a gateway through which Lam and other extra-cosmic influences could enter the known universe, and more specifically, our Earth-world reality. But according to occultists involved in such things, the portal has since widened, thanks in part to additional hermetic tinkering by Jack Parsons. By 1945, Jack Parsons was high priest of Crowley's Agape Lodge in Pasadena, where he was joined by L. Ron Hubbard, later founder of Scientology. Impressed by Hubbard's exuberance and energy, Jack wrote in a letter to Crowley, "I deduce that he was in direct touch with some higher intelligence. He is the most thelemic person I have ever met, and is in complete accord with our principles." He was soon initiated into the secrets of the Ordo Templi Orientis, and made Parsons' magical partner. Together, Parsons and Hubbard hatched a sordid sex magic scheme called Babylon Working to bring forth the Antichrist and Apocalypse, Babylon meaning Gateway of the Gods. But even Crowley expressed his misgivings about this project, stating in a letter, "Apparently Parsons and Hubbard, or somebody, is producing a moonchild. I get fairly frantic when I contemplate the idiocy of these louts." A moonchild is a human vehicle for a demon seed, not unlike Rosemary's Baby. From the diaries of the participants, it was also clear that they were not as adept as Crowley in the closings of portals. What their amateur efforts may have accomplished was the drastic enlargement and ripping of an existing magical portal, and the subsequent non-closure of it. Perhaps the rip they created was not possible to close. In any event, the modern UFO era began exactly a year and a half later, on June 24, 1947, with Kenneth Arnold's sighting over the Cascade Mountains in Washington State, as well as the UFO crash at Roswell, New Mexico. Successful or not, this ambitious scheme collapsed on itself when Hubbard skipped town with Parsons' wife Betty and allegedly $50,000. Later, Hubbard claimed he was operating on orders from the Navy to break up the black magic cult at JPL. But despite their lofty hermetic ambitions, the lives of Crowley, Parsons, and Hubbard all came to tragic ends. Aleister Crowley died a destitute heroin addict in 1947. In June of 1952, Jack Parsons was killed in what was claimed to be an accidental explosion in his home laboratory. The FBI quickly moved in and mysteriously seized all his records and notes, which remain classified to this day. And L. Ron Hubbard died of a stroke in 1986. Following Crowley's fateful ritual in the Great Pyramid in 1904, his wife Rose proclaimed that the equinox of the gods has come. According to the Book of the Law that he transcribed, the rulership of three gods has held a determining force on the fate of the world throughout human history. First was the Aeon of Isis, whose reign was matriarchal and nurturing. Next was the Aeon of Osiris, her consort, whose influence was patriarchal, destructive, and full of turmoil. The Aeon of Horus, child of Isis and Osiris, was ushered in by Crowley, and is the age we live in today. Horus, as ruler, is but a child, and throughout this age we will witness the child maturing, and thus the stability of the world solidifying gradually into more harmonious new ways of thought. However, the Aeon of Horus will be preceded by an era of great violence, aggression, and fire. Shall we simply dismiss Crowley and Parsons as an eccentric pair of lecherous crackpots? Or have higher initiates within secret society operations recognized that certain profound revelations might be gleaned from their magical workings? Revelations so profound as to be secretly incorporated into specific space exploration projects. Is it possible that Crowley did in fact make contact with extraterrestrial beings? And was he alone in his efforts? In 1919, just 1 year after Crowley's Amalanthra workings in New York City, members of an occult group in Germany called the Vril Society claimed to have established telepathic contact through trance medium Maria Orsic with beings from the Aldebaran star system in the constellation of Taurus. These aliens were said to have actually gifted the Vril Society with flying saucer technology. Even famed German rocket engineer Hermann Oberth himself admitted the success of German technological advances during the war was thanks in part to the people of other worlds. And later, following World War II, there evolved a curious convergence of American and Nazi technologies within NASA's space rocket development programs. Was merely building more superior rockets than the Russians the driving motivation for such an odd alliance? Or was it something deeper, darker, and far more occult? And more than that, just what explains the driving motivation behind the relentless perpetuation of secret societies all throughout human history? Crowley's main goal of practicing Western magic was to advance humanity by contact with higher intelligence, either by calling them down or by traveling to their planet. Crowley believed contact with these higher intelligences was attainable by becoming one with them, that is, by metamorphing into man-gods or supermen. This goal was attainable through the ancient systems of Hebrew and Babylonian Kabbalah and other forms of metaphysical science. The Kabbalah is a collection of Jewish magical texts that were given to mankind via psychic communion with a fallen angel called Raziel, keeper of the secrets. Raziel is one of the fallen angels that serve the light-bringer Lucifer. The Kabbalah gives Kabbalists a roadmap called the Tree of Life, which explains how to invoke and communicate with a pantheon of powerful spirits. The magical information in the Kabbalah originates from Babylon and ancient Egypt at the time of the pharaohs. The Holy Grail sought by the Knights Templar in the secret chambers under Solomon's Temple was not gold and treasures. It was instead the Hebrew Kabbalistic text itself, which contains secret alchemical codes with which physical matter can be transformed molecule by molecule by the use of incantations of ancient Hebrew letters and numbers. The secret codes to gain mastery over the illusory nature of reality itself. This was the heart of Crowley's ritual magic, as well as Freemasonry's. But the quest for attaining the gods was not limited to Hebrew Kabbalah. A powerful impulse to access its supernatural roots appeared in Germany after the turn of the 20th century. Disaffected with the gross materialism of rampant industrialization, the German people sought new doctrines that would restore lost links to their true cultural heritage. In 1881, Madame Helena Blavatsky claimed to have traveled to Tibet and there to have been initiated into the secrets of spiritual masters she called the hidden elect. In the doctrines of occultists, the hidden elect or the Great White Brotherhood are believed to be humans who by initiation and self-denial have risen to become adepts. They have gained powers and knowledge beyond those of ordinary mortals. Unlike Aleister Crowley, Madame Blavatsky did not claim to be an adept in her own right, but she did claim constant telepathic communication with her hidden masters. They had revealed to her, their chosen one, the occult history of the human race, within which contained the conception of the blonde, blue-eyed Aryan race as being the master race. Austrian clairvoyant Guido von List believed that in the Germans, more than any other people, runs the blood of the mythical race called by Madame Blavatsky the Aryans. List saw the outbreak of World War I as proof that the modern world with its materialism and its democracy was destroying itself. But out of war and destruction would come the victory of the German cause and the beginning of an Aryan millennium. List revived the prayer of the 16th century philosopher and heretic Giordano Bruno. Old Jove, let the Germans realize their own strength, and they shall not be men, but gods. Like Aleister Crowley and Madame Blavatsky, List's psychic researches led him to believe in the existence of a hidden elect. His visions of the ancient Germanic tribes had revealed to him an elite class of priest rulers called the Armenenschaft. The role of the Armenenschaft was to preserve the occult knowledge of the Germans' Aryan ancestors. List claimed that the imposition of Christianity on the Teutonic tribes and the persecution of the followers of the old religion forced the Armenenschaft to continue its traditions in secret. Their law had lived on in the rituals and symbols of a network of secret societies. The store of occult knowledge had been preserved down the centuries by Freemasons, Rosicrucians, and chivalrous orders of the Knights Templar. With the rise of National Socialism in Germany, Hitler's deputy Heinrich Himmler formed a new occult order of Teutonic Knights out of the Armenenschaft, which became the Nazi SS, a powerful secret society that would eventually claim German rocket design genius Werner von Braun as one of its members. After World War II, thanks to Operation Paperclip, von Braun and virtually his entire Nazi V-2 rocket design staff were repatriated into America's space rocket program, where they would continue to pursue their own secret space exploration ambitions. The whole history of the occult is a legacy of daring exploration. From the Knights Templar seeking out hidden chambers under King Solomon's temple, there arose a secret society brotherhood determined to seek out the lost mysteries of ancient alchemical magic. Christopher Columbus followed Templar traditions to set out for the New World. Even the colonies fighting for existence in early America were a Freemasonic enterprise. As well, the daring explorations of Freemasons Lewis and Clark opened North America for pioneer settlement. More recently, daring 33-degree Freemason Admiral Richard E. Byrd and his pilot Bernd Balken in 1928 dropped Masonic flags on both the North and South Poles. Balken even added his shrine fez. In the Antarctic expedition of 1933, 60 of its 82 members were Freemasons, and on February 5, 1935, Byrd established the first Masonic Antarctic Lodge, number 777 of the New Zealand Constitution. Rare mention is given to the fact that in late 1938, just before World War II, Admiral Richard E. Byrd visited Hamburg, Germany, and was invited to participate in the pending Nazi Neuschwabenland Antarctic expedition. Despite his great expertise with polar exploration, Byrd declined the German invitation. However, in 1947, a United States Navy task force under his command was dispatched to the Antarctic for the alleged purpose of mapping the pole. Was this subtle evidence of a competition between German and American secret societies to rediscover Atlantis under the South Polar ice? In 1969, assuming the Apollo 11 astronauts actually landed on the Moon, while Neil Armstrong hopped about on his moonwalk, 32nd degree Freemason astronaut Buzz Aldrin was performing a solemn Masonic ritual to honor Isis inside the lunar module. His Masonic flag, which accompanied him to the Moon and back, is now an honored relic on display at the Scottish Rite Freemason Temple in Washington, D.C. The Holy Grail, sought by secret societies and contained within Kabbalah or Middle Eastern Babylonian magic, was mastery over materia prima, the very fabric of time and space. And it is this key fragment of lost esoteric technologies, the hermetic secret of materia prima, that has been preserved by ancient priesthoods and after many centuries passed on as the occult alchemy or practical magic still utilized by modern secret societies today. Common occult symbols variously represent materia prima, or the unseen hyperdimensional physics that drives our physical reality. The hexagram, far more than the representation of Judaism, is symbolic of the spinning tetrahedron. Even the swastika is a stylized representation of spinning torsion physics. The age-old alchemical quest has been to steal materia prima down from heaven and capture it in material form within this world's three-dimensional existence. Could this be the secret motivation behind particular NASA projects? Is it conceivable that high initiates within NASA had been made aware from certain Aleister Crowley channelings that specific artifacts existed on the Moon, Mars, and even Venus that were essential components for the continued advancement of this hermetic understanding and alchemical mastery, that the alchemical Holy Grail lies just beyond our grasp on the Moon or Mars? Just prior to World War II, when Jack Parsons was experimenting with rocket engines in Pasadena's Arroyo Seco, on the other side of the country, 33rd degree Freemason and head of the National Science Foundation, Dr. Vannevar Bush, was working with noted Harvard astronomer Dr. Donald Menzel to develop the differential analyzer, an analog computer capable of predicting centuries ahead the future positions of stars and planets from any point in the solar system, an indispensable tool that would eventually allow NASA to accurately predict planetary configurations related to flight mission specifics, not to mention arcane astrological configurations. Curiously, following the Roswell UFO crash in 1947, both Drs. Vannevar Bush and Donald Menzel were to figure prominently as major players on President Truman's top-secret Magic 12 UFO investigation team. By 1958, the distinctly civilian National Aeronautics and Space Administration, NASA, was born with ambitious plans for both manned and unmanned space exploration missions. Having studied the potential social ramifications of such projects, the Brookings Institution filed a report in 1960 entitled Proposed Studies on the Implications of Peaceful Space Activities for Human Affairs. This report cautioned that anthropological files contain many examples of societies sure of their place in the universe which have disintegrated when they had to associate with previously unfamiliar societies espousing different ideas and different life ways. Thus, to avoid social disintegration, the Brookings Report recommended that discovery of any extraterrestrial life forms or their artifacts might be wisely withheld from general public disclosure. However, the report curiously made specific reference to the Moon, Mars, and Venus as being possible repositories for such extraterrestrial artifacts, almost as if knowledge of the existence of such artifacts had already been established and specifically targeted for recovery. Thus, considering the profound influence of Aleister Crowley over Jack Parsons at the inception of JPL, the Jet Propulsion Lab in Pasadena, and its subsequent intrinsic association with the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, NASA, do we dare surmise that major space exploration projects have been deeply influenced, if not directed, by Crowley's alleged associations with extraterrestrial or extra-dimensional entities? As early as 1918, Crowley's aliens revealed the existence of tantalizing artifacts on Mars.
Now, Crowley, in the latter part of the last century and the beginning of this, the 20th, claimed to have had many such indescribable contacts, but two were of the greatest importance in apparently redirecting his entire life and thus changing the face of modern magic for all who followed. And as astonishing as it may seem, it may be that almost a century ago, Crowley was given a revelation about things that are coming to pass, even as we speak here tonight. The first contact that Crowley relates was in April of 1904 in Cairo. Cairo, by the way, is Seleucid Arabic for Mars. Crowley tells us that he encountered an entity who he considered to be his, quote, holy guardian angel. This entity identified himself as Aiwass and proceeded to dictate to Crowley the so-called Book of the Law, or what would eventually become, to some, the canon of 20th century magical practice. By the time of Hitler's rise, most of pre-World War II European occult traditions were dominated by the magical system that Crowley painstakingly created. And Hitler himself was envious of Crowley's infamy as the most evil man in the world, as well as his magical prowess. Hitler said this in several volumes, including one called Hitler Speaks. Crowley claims that his second otherworldly encounter, which resulted in an even more profound influence on his work in magic, occurred at Montauk, Long Island in New York in 1918. This entity introduced himself as Lamb, which Crowley was quick to point out meant pathmaker, pathfinder, in the Tibetan language. It is from this word that Lam-as of Tibet are so called. The lamb was also the ancient symbol for Ares, Mars, as well as the resurrected god, Tammuz, Osiris, Christ, etc. Rising from the ashes, Crowley drew an effigy of Lamb, which eerily represents the popular modern image of an alien some half a century later. Lamb told Crowley a story about Mars, concerning a lotus flower, the three-petaled Pathfinder lander, perchance, symbolic of hyperdimensional physics, looking at a mountain peak which had sharp edges where something sits and shines like the sun on water. He said it was a seed waiting to be born. This story is also related in the earlier Book of the Law as dictated by Aiwass, where it is written that, quote, there will be a reward of Ra-Hur-Kuit, an aspect of Horus, the babe in the egg, waiting to be reborn, whose number is 97. Lamb then goes on to state, thou art to go this way, and speaks of a lightning flash of enlightenment, which in occult tradition is symbolic of Mars, the god of war and fire. The power behind these occult systems of philosophy on which the various mystery schools have historically been based lies in the beliefs of their practitioners that they embody universal laws of nature, reflecting fundamental properties embedded in everything visible to human beings, including man himself. No one person, people, or race can thus lay just claim to own such laws, although many throughout history, such as Hitler, have made the attempt. Two exquisite but radically different examples of the encoding of such natural systems here on Earth are demonstrated by the Hebrew alphabet and by none other than the Great Pyramid of Giza, Egypt. So let me do this. The designers of these two similar but separately unique creations, in fact, apparently have encoded the same internal systems within each, an unfolding mathematical or architectural pattern communicating information proposed by their designers to be streaming from higher dimensions, i.e. a hyperdimensional physics, into our familiar three-dimensional reality. Radically different schematic blueprints represented by widely divergent physical systems here on Earth for, in essence, preserving identical yet extremely ancient views of the origin and structure of the universe. One aspect of war on Earth may well be the battle to become heir to all aspects of this ancient, crucial knowledge of reality and keep the other guy from finding out. Those in power, apparently on rediscovering this ancient knowledge preserved from when and where, repeatedly make apparent conscious decisions to keep it for themselves. They repeatedly set up institutions recognized as priesthoods, Sumer, Babylon, Egypt, in order to dole out crumbs from this priceless storehouse to all the rest of us, while they do their level best to keep the real secret doctrines totally away. And the reasons are not always selfish. At least, it doesn't seem to always start out that way. Usually it comes about because one of those with this special information cannot always freely share what one knows because of the real threat of being persecuted during one of those myriad inquisitions that roll over the planet from time to time to time. However, even when it becomes safe to reveal such knowledge without fear of persecution, as when democracies eventually arise, the withholding of such knowledge by a chosen few seems to have become the prime objective for reasons based on arrogance, patriarchy, and discrimination by the chosen. There is also a belief within the mystery schools themselves that true understanding and evolution can only come about through proper cultivation and innate revelation brought about by symbolism and a consistent array of subtle images and themes. This process is supposed to enable the individual to reveal the bigger picture from within. It appears that this methodology for revealing long, secret information is currently taking place at many levels in society, imperiled by those with the foregoing view. Thus, simultaneous with the controllers, there may also exist a few benevolent efforts, truly benevolent efforts, to leak images and paint pictures in a way that those with eyes will see. Is this possibly why we're getting this incredible information about Mars out of JPL, even as they lie at all these press conferences? I mean, I would like to think so. I would really like to think that there is a counterforce, that we've got allies up there, and whatever their long-term agenda, their short-term agenda appears to be to give us the tools to fight back, to face lies with truth.
President John F. Kennedy was not a Freemason, and after only 4 months in office, he openly spoke out against secret societies. Yet NASA basked in the warmth of his ardent enthusiasm for space exploration right up until November 12, 1963, when he ordered Freemason mission director James Webb to initiate NASA plans for a joint United States-Soviet lunar exploration initiative. From that point, the occult brotherhoods closed ranks against Kennedy. And faithful to their oaths of secrecy, the traitor was ritually sacrificed in the open-air Masonic temple, Dealey Plaza in Dallas, Texas, November 22, 1963. Immediately following Kennedy's assassination, Congressman Albert Thomas, Freemason protege of Lyndon Johnson, who controlled NASA's funding, shared a knowing wink with Lyndon Johnson aboard Air Force One that NASA's occult secrets were saved. Since its inception, NASA had become the occult empire of not only the Masons but of Hitler's SS and Crowley's magicians. These ritual elitists had literally stolen the entire space program for themselves from the rest of all mankind. They had apparently been discreetly incubating for many years, even before NASA, with Brookings Institution insiders to foment political excuses to keep key NASA discoveries carefully hidden from the general public. The space agency appears to have been nothing less than a massive technological effort to validate their hermetic visions of literally accessing the home of Osiris on the surface of the moon and beyond, to which they and they alone deserved sole access. Space is destined to remain the exclusive possession of only those with the proper bloodlines and perspectives. All three of these secret societies retain at their core a deep obsession with the gods and magic of ancient Egypt. Thus it should not be surprising to discover that the sole individual responsible for selection of the Apollo landing sites was himself an Egyptian. Dr. Farouk El-Baz was born in Cairo, Egypt, and educated in the United States. He was a geologist who taught in Germany and the United States before becoming involved with NASA's space program in 1967, when he applied for a position at Bellcom, the corporation handling communication systems for the Apollo program. But after El-Baz came on board, Bellcom's job description underwent a significant change. They were now suddenly in charge of selecting the actual landing sites for the Apollo program. In fact, El-Baz was solely in charge of the site selection process. El-Baz became the guy who picked all of the landing sites, controlled the dissemination and analysis of all the photography, and directly oversaw the astronauts' geological training, preparing them for what they would actually observe on the lunar surface. In short, he was the most powerful single individual in the American space program. And it just so happens that El-Baz's father was an expert in the ancient Egyptian stellar religions of Isis and Osiris. So basically you have the son of an expert on the Osiris cults picking the landing sites where all the occult stellar alignments take place. All of the NASA landing site selection meetings were private. All of their meetings were classified, and none of their paperwork has been declassified. Now, lest there be any lingering doubts about NASA's occult devotion to ancient Egypt, consider the name of its pending 2016 robotic asteroid landing mission, OSIRIS-REx.
When I was talking with the gentleman from Bellcom, and we were discussing the lie, everything he was telling me was different from what we were being told was the truth. And at one point I asked him, I said, man, you guys, you lied about a lot, didn't you? And instantly he said, no, we didn't lie about certain things. We lied about everything. None of it was true.
Understand that those occult practitioners who already partially rule over nations and worldly governments have pretensions to absolute, omnipotent domination. This is the only thing which they have not yet achieved. Unless there be any lingering doubts about the conspiratorial nature of Freemasonry, consider this quote from 33rd degree Freemason General Albert Pike, taken from his Masonic Lexicon book, Morals and Dogma. Masonry, like all the religions, all the mysteries, hermeticism, and alchemy, conceals its secrets from all except the adepts and sages, or the elect, and uses false explanations and misinterpretations of its symbols to mislead those who deserve only to be misled, to conceal the truth which it calls light from them, and to draw them away from it. Truth is not for those who are unworthy or unable to receive it, or would pervert it. The truth must be kept secret, and the masses need a teaching proportioned to their imperfect reason. Every man's conception of God must be proportioned to his mental cultivation and intellectual powers and moral excellence. God is, as man conceives him, the reflected image of man himself.